I really don't see this kind of pay-per-click model going away anytime soon. Whether it be the LLMs or whether it be the search engines, they're getting better and better at parsing your site and figuring out if it's good, authentic, valuable content. The thing that's a little bit different for LLMs specifically is structure.
1, 2, 3, 4.
You're listening to Owner RX with Alan Pentz, the podcast for business owners who want to scale without sacrifice. Each episode delivers battle-tested strategies from the Owner RX Playbook Library, showing you exactly how to build systems that run without you. Here's your host, Alan Pentz.
All right, we are back today with Andy Janaitis of PPC Pitbulls. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
That is, yeah.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the pod, Andy, and tell us a little bit about the company.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. We're a small digital marketing agency, kind of a boutique firm. We specialize in paid ads, so Google ads and Meta ads, and we love serving small businesses, helping to get to know the business and overcome your marketing challenges. So, really excited to chop it up a bit today.
Yeah, well, I mean, this has certainly been a big topic for companies I coach and talk to, sort of, just to get straight to it. I mean, sort of the sense that the market's changing, right? I mean, SEO kind of maybe not performing as it did before. Even some hearing some people saying that kind of Google ad performance fell off earlier
Definitely,
this
yeah.
year. And is this largely the result of, more searches moving to LLMs, I guess is a question.
Yeah, it's a big topic area. That's definitely
Yeah.
kind of what we're looking at a lot right now. I would say my personal take, and of course, I'm talking my book a little bit too as a paid ads guy, but I think we've seen a lot of transitions in the market over the years. Certainly, this past summer has been really rough across the boards. I think just general costs have risen in the ad world, and I think some of that is due to new LLM focused searches. I always kind of temper that with, I always kind of tell people say, oh, Google ads is going away. It's we're going to get away from that entire model. But at the end of the day, I always kind of think through, it still has to be monetized in some way. None of these businesses are kind of working for free, any of these LLM businesses. So, I always say, you've got the Google AI driven search results. And we already see in beta, Google's putting some ads into that section.
Mm.
So I do think that, right now we're definitely in a time of transition, and you've got to be aware of it and making sure that you're, kind of on top of the newest trends. But I really don't see, this kind of pay-per-click model going away anytime soon, because the reality is people don't really want to pay for search. So one way or the other, these search engines, whether it be a pure search engine or whether it be, going to ChatGPT or Perplexity, they've got to make money some way, and I think we're going to end up in a situation where, you may have some subscription model where they're doing, kind of pure best result. Let's send somebody to your site. But yeah, I don't think the, interspersing ads with your answers, however you're getting those answers. I don't think that's going away anytime soon.
Yeah, and in fact, we've heard Sam Altman, a year and a half ago, very strongly against ads, and he seemed to have every subsequent statement kind of dialed that back a little bit to where it
Exactly.
sounds
Yeah.
like ads are probably coming. And I follow a guy named Ben Thompson who writes a blog called Stratechery, just on tech strategy, and his take is that when you are the consumer leader, you basically have to go to ads at some point. And that's sort of like what he was saying about Netflix for years. And, once you take that spot, there basically is no other way to monetize. You're just leaving like trillions of dollars on the ground, right? So,
Exactly. Yeah. And the reality is, I mean, I love Perplexity. We use Perplexity all the time to answer questions. It gives really good, concise answers. Really deeper research than a typical Google search may be. But I always kind of say, like, Google has so much money to throw at this problem. I really don't expect that over the the long term. I really don't think Google is going to be the loser here. I think it's, kind of their game to win. We already see, Gemini results, like I was saying, really playing a heavy role there. And at the end of the day, Google's only going to cannibalize their own ad business so much, or they're going to find a way. They may find a way to convert it and get ads in that way. But yeah, whether it be that, hey, Perplexity is the new platform to run ads on, or Google, finding a way to get its own AI driven ads. I think that's really the direction.
Right. So I want to go a little deeper on that, but first I thought so the fall off in Google Ads performance, sort of like I heard about this in the spring, I
Yeah.
guess, late spring. Is that like what do you think that is? Is it just increased competition? Is it fewer people? Is it fewer people searching or
I think it's a
what
lot of
is
all of it. So obviously, like you said, we've got you've got people going over to Perplexity or ChatGPT. We see, the share of those is shifting. I think the last numbers I saw were that Google was grabbing something like 90% of the market share, where they used to
uh,
have 95% of the market share. So there definitely is, especially for like comparison shopping type things. People are going to these LLMs to solve their problem. There is, competition in general. The other thing, I really do think there's, some level of just general business uncertainty out there right now. I think people
mm,
are, a little less likely to pull the trigger on new deals or, making a big purchase. And all of that ultimately trickles down into the advertising market where, even outside of competition, I think just the consumer is a little bit uh, less likely to buy quite as quickly. It's not quite as the money's not as free flowing as it was previously, and all of that ultimately rolls up into your ad results. If you're sending people to a site for a given cost per click, but they're converting at even just a little bit lower of a rate, that's going to ultimately make your your ROAS, your customer acquisition costs, whatever kind of metrics you're looking most at, start to tail off a little bit. So those are some of the big kind of trends that
yeah.
we're seeing. But more than anything, like I said, we're seeing across the board, just in general, costs are going up.
Yeah.
Cost per acquisition.
Yeah, and I that's true. Talking to three or four or five service businesses over the last few weeks, and you just, not even doing Google or digital at all, and they're seeing, hesitation on buying, asking for splitting up bills, and so you do get this sense that two things are kind of happening at the same time. One is people are getting a little tighter with money, and two, costs are under pressure, right? So
Exactly.
and just acronym there, return on ad spend is ROAS. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
ROAS. So it's essentially for every dollar you're putting into your ads, how much revenue are you getting out as a proportion?
so then on where you're seeing this beta with Google, Gemini responses, how are they displaying the ads? Like I'm sure they're testing it right now to see what works, but
Yeah. So a lot of
I've
it's
heard
still
there's a lot of
largely,
uncertainty about this, right?
yeah, it's largely in beta. It's not something you can necessarily opt into. It's, there's like kind of, it's almost more like rumor mill at this point, so you can look and see, people will find an ad, in the wild. There's articles where you can see these things, but it's not like a setting you can turn on in your ad accounts or start testing and experimenting with it right now. But yeah, ultimately it looks like there's going to be, some level of, especially right now, Google thrives on performance max is kind of the big player. That's it's kind of cross channel, so it's search, shopping, YouTube. Basically, you're putting a bunch of assets in and then letting Google's algorithm kind of decide which channels it's going to be placing your
Mm.
ads, and doing a lot of automation with the ads, who it's putting in front of, how much it's bidding on given placements. And so it makes it very easy, because that's kind of it's very black box. It makes it very easy for Google to kind of roll in some of these additional placements, where you don't have a ton of visibility as a business or as an advertiser. But we do see reports of sponsored results showing up mixed in with the AI results.
And does it look like a blue link or like, the old
It's
click?
in, so if you're familiar with that kind of like AI results section, so now
Yeah.
if you do your search, you always kind of have that AI answer right under. It's kind of mixed in there where they can kind of link out. So you've got like the answer, and then it's got the little citation links coming out. It's kind of mixed in there.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm kind of curious what this is going to look like, particularly in-depth back and forth conversations. I've kind of always wondered, like, is it, I guess, yeah, you have reference links, so you can kind of
Yeah.
mix some stuff below the answer, but I think eventually isn't it gonna be
It's
in the
interesting.
answer or right
I
next
don't
to
know.
it or
There's certain problems that are really good for that, you know. So if how to type things, I use that all the time now for when we're building something in a certain particular tool. Like, hey, how do I get to this setting in this tool? Or that's kind of working in the digital space every day. I use that all the time because it'll basically
yeah.
take all these different sources and summarize and give you a step by step for the exact thing you want to do. But at the end of the day, if you're looking for like, hey, where's the nearest restaurant? Or, hey, I want to buy, or, for instance, like service based businesses, hey, plumber near me, that kind of thing. That to me still is more, it lends itself more to a traditional search, a list of results and allowing you to kind of parse through. I don't think you necessarily want like, hey, here's the one best answer for me in those types of situations. You want to be able to do some of the analysis yourself.
Right.
So I don't think it's going to be quite as smooth of a cutover as people think, where it's going to be, hey, for every single query, you're basically going to get a single answer and you're not going to get the list of blue links anymore.
Yeah. Well, so what I've been hearing, we were talking just before this, I was at a webinar yesterday, someone talking about, the GEO, I guess they
Yeah,
call it, right? The Generative Engine Optimization. It's one of the acronyms out there for what search, how do you get your content into LLMs, basically.
exactly.
And so they were saying, a couple things I thought were interesting. One is, keywords they felt like weren't as essential anymore. And it was really about what is the journey that your customer is going through to find whatever the result is that you are. You need to answer those questions
Yeah,
or provide the information they're looking for on that journey in a much more accurate way and can't rely as much on like general content or something. I don't
exactly.
know.
Yeah.
So are you hearing kind of that similar?
Yes, yeah, I think that's definitely the storyline. To be honest, it's funny. I think it's more of these are the trends that we've been seeing in the SEO
Right.
world in general. Anyway, it's been, hey, you can't keyword stuff and just put a bunch of jam a bunch of keywords in there. You have to produce content that's actually helping your potential customer solve a problem. So like I always kind of tell small business people, especially, like, you don't need to invest in somebody who's going to, charge you a bunch of money to do GEO, or however they're acronyming it now. I think at the end of the day, it's the same story that we've had for a while now. It's that whether it be the LLMs or whether it be the search engines, they're getting better and better at parsing your site and figuring out if it's good, authentic, valuable content. So that's your starting point, is you've got to be writing content that actually solves your customer's problem. And then the thing that's a little bit different for LLMs specifically is structured. So it's less, a block of text, and it's more, either even just with headers, making sure that, hey, you're laying out the specific questions and problems you're solving in a very structured way, because that's more understandable to the models. But even like FAQs, I feel like is a big, GEO a technique now, where it's just taking all the content that you typically would have written and just put it into an FAQ type
Hmm.
format, so that you're getting this question, here's your answer. This question, here's your answer. And the reason for that is these are all just predictive models, kind of predicting the next word in the sentence. You always hear that it's not truly real artificial intelligence. It's a very, very highly tuned way to predict which word should come next in the sentence. So if you're trying to show users that you have an authentic answer to a given question, having truly putting that structure on your site where you have that specific question and then specific content answering that question right after it, is actually getting like, deep into the way the model works. As hey, more often we see that projected
Mm.
next word is the most likely thing to come after that specific question. So I think
Yeah.
that's the one kind of piece that maybe is a little bit different. But honestly, that's something we've been doing from an SEO perspective for a long time anyway. So I think the biggest thing is that, like, technical SEO is starting to become less and less effective. Like all these kind of tips and tricks we used to use for SEO or GEO that's not really the thing anymore. It's just authenticity. Find out what your customers are actually asking when they're in the buying process for your service, and then go ahead and answer it in an honest and correct way.
Right. So that's almost like, if you think about it, these are large language models, right?
Yeah,
Mostly. I mean, not 100%, but they read text, right? And like just for I've been doing some stuff with a software tool and just learning about chunking and things like that, where they use these vector databases, and then obviously that eventually becomes part of the model. It reads that way, and so it's really like you're writing markdown files for the
yeah,
for the
exactly,
LLM, right? Where it's very structured, like heading one, and then there's subheadings at this size, and
exactly.
everything logically flows. And it's like if you just think about it logically, that's the way the computer's reading it, or the algorithm's reading it. And it does have an impact on image content on your site, wouldn't it? I mean, like it doesn't have as good a way of categorizing that at this point,
I
right?
guess that could be, yeah, definitely to a degree, but it's going to have all the same problems that old search engine browsers would have as well.
Yeah,
It's the ability to interpret the content. You want to make sure that you have strong alt tags on any images you have, so that it's clear what that is and what's being shown.
yeah,
But if anything, maybe it does even a little bit better job than we've typically had, because we know these models have some level of image processing.
yeah. And then you were talking about the tips and tricks. So is that sort of the keyword stuffing or backlink type
Exactly.
stuff?
Yeah.
And
Like a
yeah,
lot of those types of things that were, you know, trying to game the algorithm, for lack of a better term. For a long time, Google's been working to kind of stamp each of those out. It's been, kind of whack-a-mole, that as something comes up, that, hey, this is the new thing that you do on your site. Keyword stuffing is probably very old on like the,
right.
the
Yeah.
spectrum of these solutions, but all the little things that you could be doing, Google kind of, I think has been moving for a long time in the direction of like, let's, less do writing for the algorithm and more do, figure out an algorithm that can
Find the
successfully
good
make sure that
content.
we're validating good, useful content.
Yeah, and so then the other thing I heard in this webinar was that the conversion, like they're not as many searches, but the conversions are much better. So like even looking at like site traffic doesn't really matter. It's like
Yeah,
how many, because a lot of those visitors were useless, right? They weren't going to buy anything and
exactly.
convert. But now you got much higher intent signals
To
on the
the yeah, kind
LLMs.
of the user experience, the buying journey is just a lot different now, where you're doing a lot of your research in the LLM before you ever get to the site. Where in the old days, your list of blue links, for lack of a better term, there's going to be a lot of clicking on it, trying to figure out what's there, clicking on the next one, trying to figure out what's there. So just in general, you're not converting on every link you click. Whereas now, you know, a lot of that research being done for you, getting rolled up into, hey, here's a more discrete set of possible, places you might want to go to ultimately execute your purchase. So I think it makes sense that once people hit your site, they're further down the funnel and they're likely to convert more quickly.
So, and then just going back to, your core business. So it's really Google and Meta ads, right?
Yeah,
Um, and increasingly, this is going to this sort of, I don't even know what you call it now. It's beyond programmatic advertising, and then it's sort of like black box. We
exactly.
don't
Yeah.
we don't even want to know what your message is. We just want what you're going to sell, and then we'll give you customers.
And then we'll
Is
figure
that
it out
sort of
for
where
you.
we're
Yeah.
going? Yeah, because you
Yeah.
hear but Zuckerberg talking about that a lot, but you see that in Google too.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the direction we go. And it's been that way for a long time. People were very resistant to Performance Max, was kind of the big Google side of the house, and then Meta has its own set of tools with the Advantage Plus placements and targeting. And a lot of times, the downside is you get a little bit less reporting, a little bit less control. But what we found, I mean, we've time and time again tested next to each other, more manual approaches versus kind of leaning into the algorithm. And we typically find that, especially for small business, where if you have a smaller budget, you're going to have better luck kind of going with the algorithm. Don't fight the platform, kind of work it the
Mm,
way that they're asking you to. I always like to use the example, people will say, hey, we know that our, ideal client is, a man in, age 40 to 50 range, whatever. So like, let's block out every other demographic and only show up in front of them. And I always say, well, that may sound like a great idea on the surface, but at the end of the day, you've got to also remember that all of your competitors are probably going after that same exact demographic. So where, you may find that a woman in the 18 to 25 range is less likely to buy your product. It may be much cheaper to show up in front of them. So by completely blocking out any of these demographics, that's just one example of, a very manual tweak you could do either on a Google or a Meta. Whereas if you just kind of, submit to the algorithm and let it say, hey, optimize my budget, they may find places where you're getting like a lower hit rate, but at a much cheaper cost per, per view essentially. And ultimately that's where they're going to find opportunities that you wouldn't be able to kind of like logically pick out on the front end.
So where does that leave the agency then, right? If they're automating everything.
Yeah. I always think it really, in my opinion, at least, I think it's that the agency is going to have to take one step higher and go to more strategic levels. So like the implementation, ad buying is there's less, again, kind of tips and tricks to it. It's straightforward. If you want to run ads, anybody can go into Google and set up their first campaign, get it started, follow the wizard. There are a few little gotchas here and there, like things that still, you can get carried away quickly, especially if you have a little bit larger budget. And Google and Meta are both really good at making you spend as much of your money as possible. So, I definitely would caveat, like, do a little research and don't just jump in and do it yourself right off the bat. But I think where the agencies are really, really going to be helpful, especially for small businesses, is understanding, how to allocate your budget. Is it that for this particular product, I want to be more on Google, or I want to be more on Meta, or, hey, let me interpret the results as they're coming out and understand what is, when Meta or Google says, hey, this campaign will be improved if you increase the budget. Really understanding like what are the results we're getting today, and like, does that suggestion actually make sense, or would we be better off to take that same ad spend and put it into helping the landing page to get a higher conversion rate, or to more email marketing techniques or whatever. It's that high level strategy of where we're putting budget and how we're testing out different areas, either cross channel or more holistically across the entire marketing stack. I think that's where this whole industry is going to go, that kind of strategic, holistic thinking that, any one platform, no matter how good the AI in that platform is, they don't have the visibility into the other platforms, as well as, there's a lot of times if you just blindly follow what it's telling you to do, you can get in a lot of trouble. So I would say, in my opinion, at least, that's kind of where we're going. Individual contributors are going to be able to do more work more quickly with a lot of these tools at their fingertips. But it doesn't mean that, the job of being able to successfully place ads is going away. It's just getting a little bit more strategic and higher level.
Interesting. And then just a little tactical on that. So I've been hearing a lot recently about the difference between Google and Meta ads, right? And so
Yeah.
I just get this like Meta people come in, they're terrible leads, right? And and then there's just certain things that you can only get off of Meta, right? Because Google people aren't searching for that
Yeah.
necessarily in Google. So is that anecdotally like sort of what you see,
I think
or?
that pretty much covers. Yeah. So broadly speaking, Meta is great for, I kind of think of it as like a interruption based marketing on the Meta side. So, hey, you're
Mm,
scrolling your phone, you see a bunch of, you see something new that you didn't even know that you wanted, and you go and you click on it and maybe buy it, maybe don't. Whereas Google is intent based marketing. So, hey, you've got a problem in mind, you're looking for a particular product or service, you go and make your search, and then you go. So what that means is that the traffic coming from Google has that high intent. So it's going to be probably higher quality traffic, but you're going to pay more for it as well. And on the Meta side, hey, it's a lot of impulse kind of tire kickers. That was kind of neat, that ad I saw. Let me go ahead and click on it. Maybe I'll buy, maybe I won't. So it's just generally lower quality traffic. But again, it's cheaper.
right.
So depending on what your business is, if you have an intent-based business, in the service business world, especially, if you're a plumber, or, it's, hey, I'm going to be working for somebody when they need their roof fixed, in that 2 week period that they're making their decision, that's when they're going to be hitting them. Google's going to perform a lot better because, I don't think people are necessarily building a long-term brand association with a roofer and having that in mind. And then all of a sudden, when something goes wrong, they know about it. So it's less educational. It's much more, hey, when somebody's searching for it, let's make sure we get in front of them.
Mhm.
On the other hand, if you have a, especially a product-based business, or, a lot of service-based businesses too, where it's something that could be more of an impulse purchase, something that's not, I don't know that I need it right now, or it's the type of product that needs some education that you didn't even know that product existed, it's going to tend to perform a little bit better on Meta, because it gives you a little bit more space. It's very video heavy, very image heavy,
Yeah.
to kind of present your product and the differentiators so that your customer can get to know it and then ultimately make their purchase decision.
So that was an example of kind of the stuff that agencies are going to be doing in the future, right? It's like kind of
Exactly.
distinguishing,
Those
right?
types of decisions. If you say, hey, I got to run ads, I'm gonna go jump on Google and start doing it. Google's more than happy to take your money, whether it's a good fit for you or not.
Right. So a question I have about that, I've been sort of producing this thesis about where professional services and agencies are going with AI. And there's a part of me, I'm still conflicted. I mean, there's a part of me that's like, why can't Andy take all the content he's ever produced, all his knowledge, and just, basically build like a database that an LLM uses to help people make decisions, and then just keep it updated? Like, why do I have
Yeah,
to hire humans who like charge X amount of money every month, and
exactly. Yeah,
it's three, two, three, four, 5,000, $10,000, depending on whatever, instead of like $500 that
yeah.
the Andy bot tells me what to do.
Tell me.
Like, and maybe there's a role for Andy to be like an hour every month or two, and you
Yeah,
have like 5,000 clients
yeah.
instead of, or whatever, something like that.
I think the trend in general, I think, to a degree, I think we may push in that direction a little bit. They're like, hey, it gets cheaper to serve an individual client. So maybe agencies do spread out. I don't think it's going to get to that point where it's one person serving 5,000 clients versus,
Right.
but if it used to be that, hey, your capacity for, we run like kind of marketing pods. If a small marketing pod used to be able to serve 5 clients, maybe they can now serve 10 clients or even 20 clients or something like that. But one kind of thing that I always, maybe the pushback to that, or one of the reasons
Mhm.
why that's not going to be like a light switch flipping, is that I always find in my day to day, it's very often that I'm sitting on a client call and I, kind of give my spiel that I've given, like to that question of Google
Mhm.
ads versus meta ads, where I've got my kind of response, or I understand the problem that they have, and, my professional opinion on which would be better for them. And I kind of go through my whole little shtick, and then the,
Mhm.
the client kind of repeats back to me and got entirely the wrong impression from what, you know what I mean? So like, like I go through that whole spiel, and then they say, oh, you just told me that Meta was cheaper. Okay, great. So we should be using Meta, right? And it's like, no, I did. That was somewhere in there, but like, that wasn't the takeaway that you were supposed to get. That was the, one small part of it. And I think that's the piece that the LLMs can't necessarily take away. So you could take, even if you could perfect to the point that the client asks the question and then it responds in the exact same way that I would have responded, I think there's always still that extra little human understanding of, wait, let's just double check. Like, do we have the same understanding here? And is there the nuance, really? I mean, ultimately is kind of what can get lost there, even in, human person to person interactions, where I'm
Right.
truly understanding what I'm trying to say. We still have those misunderstandings because that's just human communication. And I think sometimes the danger with LMs, it's almost like an overfit problem that, like, it can get real quick. You can get down a rabbit hole of like, okay, well, based on what you just told me, I think I should run meta ads. Is that a good idea? Yeah, great. We can do that for you. And like, it just, it'll kind of follow along. If you don't know what you're doing, or if you don't know to ask the right questions of it, it will follow you down a rabbit hole. It's not necessarily a great
Right.
a great lead. Sometimes you can lead. So if you're going to an LLM with the, anticipating that you're going to be led by the LLM, sometimes it's going to be following your responses
Of
and take
course.
you down a rabbit hole that's, you need somebody to be the sanity check and be like, hey, no, wait a minute.
Right.
That's not the right direction for this business. Like, that's not the way we should be
I
going.
I do 100% agree with that. I do think that as you create the Andy bot, though,
Yeah.
you can cut off a lot of that lead the LLM going down the rabbit hole because you're controlling, through a RAG process or
Yeah.
something. You can control what it's saying. But I think that more will go to that, more and more like ac actual like information gathering and information communication will go to that bot. And at a certain point you'll charge for it. But I still think there's something. This is what my example was when I tell someone that they need to fire someone that they've worked with for 20 years as a business coach, the emotional weight of me saying I've had to do that like 10 times and like this sucks and you're gonna have to do it. And like a chatbot just at this point cannot give you that
Exactly.
emotional
Yeah.
weight, nor can they really say, you know what, look, you're not gonna win on Meta, right?
Yeah.
Like even though you think it's cheaper. So that's where I think that emotional register that you bring to like just there's this like I've said this a couple times, but there's a like an Italian researcher that found these people had brain damage that it damaged their emotional centers, but they
Yeah.
still had cognitive ability, and all they would do was like think about things all the time, and they could never make decisions because emotions are somehow involved in a decision making process.
Yeah.
And so like that's sort of the same thing with an LLM. So I feel like our like we'll probably outsource more and more of the day-to-day tactical stuff. It will tell you, no, you should do this versus that, but you'll still need to talk to Andy to get the like, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I think you can probably serve 200 clients, not 20.
Yeah.
But,
It's almost
we'll see.
pushing
We'll
more
see.
in that like coaching direction of like, hey, answering the hard questions. And, I love that example too, because it's like there can be the exact same, like two businesses that are in almost the exact same situation. For some of, like for one of them, you just understand their emotional, their financial situation, everything. And it's for them, it's like, hey, no, it's a hard, like, I got to push back on you a little bit. Like, you've got to fire that person. That's the right
Right.
answer. And for some of them, it's like, well, I would have said you should fire them, but you told me you don't want to. And that seems like that might be the right answer for you too. Like there's that
Right.
nuance in there that you've got to be able to have that you
Yeah.
can't necessarily get from the
And the other thing I'm really wondering about is like, is AI the ability for you, say, you focused on Google and Meta ads, right? But there's other aspects of marketing out there, brand and I guess TV and other things and SEO is slightly different.
Yep.
And so there's a bunch of disciplines in marketing, and I've always said, hey, go hire the absolute person that focuses on that thing. Don't get a generalized marketing firm because they're
Yeah.
not good, right? But so I think there's two ways to go, and probably I could guess which one I think. One is all the platforms become so transparent and everything's so algorithmed out that essentially you can do all of it,
Yeah.
right? Because it's like even with your brand, it's like I'm going to put it in a 20,000 A/B test simulator and come out with a logo and name you should have. Like
Yeah.
it's not even if I don't draw, right? And so does it go to the point where it's like, hey, you're just like an expert advisor and all these things are algorithmed out and there's no need to like be the expert in every single thing? Or does it go super niche where it's like I just know every single thing about LinkedIn, and like there's nobody in the world that knows as much about LinkedIn as I do. And I'm just curious, like, which do you have any initial reaction to where you see that going?
I mean, just as it is in the market today, there's space for both. So
Yeah,
I think to your point, hey, go out and find the expert in one given area. And it's funny is I'm a small agency. I've been at this for 5 years, so it's a problem that we think about as internally as an agency as we're growing. Like, hey, do we want to focus in and be the Google Ads experts and we don't touch anything else? Or what we found over the years is most of the clients that they come to us and they want Google Ads help, they also need some meta ads help. Or, hey, we don't really do a ton of email or like landing page CRO, but if somebody's paying us, it's small businesses with relatively small marketing budgets. If they're kind of, it's not like they're going to be able to go out and hire another entire agency
Right.
to do, hey, let's make some tweaks on this landing page to let it convert a little bit better. So we have to have that holistic understanding that, like, yeah, we're managing your ads, but to be honest with you, if you make these couple title tweaks to your landing page, it's probably going to convert better, which is really going to help your ads. So I think, like, to me, there's definitely the space for that expert agency that knows one space better than anyone else. And I think they're going to be hired by probably slightly larger organizations that already have, in the marketing world, but it's across disciplines. But in the marketing world, if you already have a marketing person or a marketing team, and for whatever reason, you just can't crack that LinkedIn nut, that's where you're going to go to, like, the firm that really knows LinkedIn, because you as a team already know that that's specifically what you need and you're going to go to them. But if you're a small business owner, you're a family-led business, a founder-driven business that, you know a little bit about marketing, but you don't necessarily know exactly what you need, you're going to need kind of a broader holistic approach. Because if you just say, hey, I was listening to a podcast, I got in my head that, meta ads are the best thing for me to run with, and I'm going to go and find the best meta ads agency, that's the one tool that they're going to have to give you. And they're not necessarily going to be able to tell you, like, hey, we experimented for a month and this
Didn't
wasn't the
work.
best. I think maybe you should put some spend into Google. Or, hey, meta ads is going to work for you, but first you got to get your email flows done. So let's help you
Hmm.
get that done too. So it just kind of depends on where you are in the business cycle, and kind of what team you have internally, to kind of figure out what you can and can't outsource.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see the development. I do think as things become more algorithmic, it'll be much easier to become that generalist, and you really become like an accountability strategy coach at that point, where you're like, hey, you're not being disciplined with your dollars, you're not doing that, you got to do that, and
Exactly.
like you really kind of move into a different thing. I think it would be really interesting, although, my recommendation always to small businesses is find one platform and just win it. And
Yeah.
then, before you move on to the next one, and like don't try to do two, three
That's
because you just don't have the
definitely
budget, right?
definitely true. Yeah, we hear that all the time. Say, hey, should we be trying Pinterest, or like, what about
Right.
TikTok? Or it's like, for the most part, for most small businesses, like, you're going to be either Meta or Google is going to be your best, quickest way to get the money. There's a certain point where you've fully scaled up and you've gotten as much as you can out of the platforms, but, like, pick one and succeed first, and then
Yeah.
figure out what you're going to do next.
And what do you tell people like when they're looking at, you know, ROAS, return on ad spend? Like, what should they be really targeting? I mean, I know it's industry by industry,
Yeah.
right? But like, what should be the vague targets? You hear CAC to LTV should be 3.1 in SaaS, but probably more like 4 or 5 point
I
to
was going to
1.
say it's so industry dependent, and honestly, it's very business dependent too. It's I always kind of turn that question around, especially to small business, where it's like, how much can you afford? It's we do a lot of e-commerce, and it's certain businesses we work with, they've got really great margins that we can return a 2x ROAS, and that's profitable enough for them that they can
Yeah.
really scale that number up. Whereas some, especially if you're kind of in a drop shipping world, you've got higher costs and lower margins on each individual sale. It might be that you need a 5x or a 6x ROAS, in order to scale. So, or in order to be profitable. So what I always kind of tell people is, one, know your numbers. Like, no matter what, please don't start running ads before you've got everything measured and you understand your unit economics, and understand, like, what number do I actually have to achieve to be profitable. And then two, always understand that in general, there's an inverse relationship between these two things. So if you can accept a 2x ROAS and be profitable, you're going to scale a lot farther than if you tell the platforms, hey, I need a 6x ROAS, or that's all I'm going to take. You may be able to achieve that at a very low ad spend, but you're not going to be able to scale up those results. So I think that's
Yeah.
kind of the trade-off that you've got to be able to think through. But typically for scale, on like the e-commerce side, we're typically looking at, maybe a 3.5, 4x, for small businesses. The larger businesses are more competitive, and they're probably going to be driving that number down a little bit as they're looking for broader scale. But on the service side, it really is all across the board, because you're talking about like the cost of a lead. How much does it cost you to or how often are you closing that lead?
Right.
And then ultimately,
Yeah.
like, what's the size of the project on the back end of that, or is it recurring and long term for a higher lifetime value?
Right. Yeah. So I say, obviously you can't answer the lifetime value question, but when somebody it's all, to me, it's all based on gross margin and length, right? So it's like, hey, if you are a SaaS business, they have this 3-to-1 LTV, lifetime value of the customer to CAC. And that's great because they have 80 to 90% gross margins.
Yeah.
But if you're running a typical services business, you might be more like 45 to 60. So you should probably be looking for every ad dollar to get you $4 in lifetime value from a
Yeah.
customer, 5 maybe,
And
But obviously, the bigger the spend, the more you can spend on the platform to get there, right?
And that's
So,
where a holistic approach, where we have clients where we look at it and it's like, hey, well, I understand for profitability's sake, you can't go lower than a 5x ROAS. So like, let's do our best, fundamentals in place, get that return, and see kind of where, how far can we scale that. But then at that point, now you got to look and say, hey, you were talking about kind of lifetime value to CAC. If, sometimes the answer to scaling isn't, let's try different creatives, let's change, our settings in the platform. It's, hey, let's change that number. Like, what is your true CAC or your true lifetime value, and what can we do to, if there's no way that we can get that cost for acquisition any lower, what can we do to, increase the lifetime value, and can we add
now
on
you're coming
a
into
better
my
retention
territory.
approach, or get the
That's
average order value up, like those types of things. Now all of a sudden you've unlocked a new area to scale, by
that's
just changing
strategy,
something on
right?
the back end. Yeah.
That's just, yeah, and I think again it's just business strategy, right? You got to
Yeah.
move one of the numbers, um, and I think that it's really crucial for people to understand these numbers, because either way, like I've seen entrepreneurs where I'm walking in and it's like a 10-to-1 spend. I'm like,
Yeah.
advertise more. Like,
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
are making $10 for every dollar you spend. Like, why don't you triple that? I
Yeah.
mean, so even if it's not, a lot of people are under advertising.
Yeah. That
Most
was one
people
of my
are,
favorite
to be honest.
clients still to this day. They've been with us since we started the business, probably longest term client. They came to us and they were spending like, I think they're spending about $1,000 a month on ads. And they're originally we're like, I don't know that we can even work with you. You're going to be like lower than our minimum retainer to be able to work with it. And then we look at it, open up their ad account, they're getting a 21x return on
Woo.
$1,000 in ad spend. And we're like, okay, so first and foremost, like all you got to do is just bump that budget up a little bit, and
So,
it's not going to scale forever. And it didn't, but now we're managing them to, closer to about a 5x return at a
yeah,
much higher spend. And it's, a lot better, a lot more profitable
wow,
for them. So
that's awesome.
that was great to see when they opened it up. Oh, they're only spending about $1,000 and we're getting 21x return.
Yeah, that was an easy client to
Yeah,
produce some
let's do it.
ROI on. So Andy, tell us, if someone wants to engage you guys or find out more,
Yeah.
what's the best way to reach out?
So our website is ppcpitbulls.com, and we'll actually have a special link just for listeners of this podcast. So if you go to ppcpitbulls.com/black holes, put a dash between those. So BLACK dash HOLES. We'll have, kind of resources from this pod, as well as an opportunity. You can download our kind of main lead magnet kind of e-commerce checklist, but you can also just book a free strategy session with me. We'll we work with a lot of small businesses, probably similar to the types of folks who are listening to this, and that's my favorite part of the job, is just hopping on and getting to know what your goals are, what your constraints are. So no pressure, no sales call, just love to chop it up and hear what you're trying to do in your business.
That's great. Well, Andy, this has been fantastic. I've learned a ton, and I'm sure our listeners have too. And we appreciate you being on.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to Owner RX with Alan Pentz. Want to apply what you just learned? Try our AI business advisor at ownerrx.com. It has all the insights and lessons from this podcast, plus hundreds of playbooks. ready to solve your specific business challenges. Owner RX. Stop being the bottleneck. Start being the owner.